Ada Calhoun.
Rob Sheffield. Thank you, Fran. Fran, you're wonderful. What a great museum you work at also. And you're wonderful, Rob. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. First things first, thank you for writing this book. Also a poet. I've always been insanely jealous of Ada's brilliance, Ada's talent, Ada's productivity, and that was before I read this book. And it didn't do wonders for my jealousy. I was so looking forward to this book. It's completely beyond even what a fan, an Ada stan, was hoping.
Well, I don't want to. We don't want to just, totally gross you all out by like fawning over each other. But I just reread "Love Is a Mixtape" and one of the best memoirs of all time, and organized around like mixtapes for each chapter. It's so beautiful. I cried today. I laughed. Anyway, everybody should read all his books and also all of the amazing Rolling Stone articles and then rankings like the Taylor Swift. Every single song, you guys, he ranked every one in order. It's amazing. So, my hero.
This book, it's so many things, but one of the many things it's sort of a love letter to New York in some ways.
I hope so. And, it's funny because when I started working on it, I thought it was going to be just pure adoration. I thought it would just be all about cocktails and cigarettes and evenings and lofts in SoHo. And it got a little darker than that, unfortunately.
Because it's a family story, but it's a very New York story. And something I love about the book is the sort of connections that you make between different generations of different New York families and cultures.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, yeah, it started out, so if you don't know, I found these cassette tapes in my parents' basement in the East Village. They were from the 1970s, and I thought, when I found out that they were toward a biography of Frank O'Hara that my father had tried to do, that I would finish it. And so then it was it was based on these tapes about the 1950s in the 2018. So, and then when I was working on it, I had to confront my whole childhood, which was 1976, into the 80s and the 90s. So it was multiple eras of New York all kind of swirling together in a sort of dysfunctional brew.
And for anyone who doesn't know, can you just give a rundown of who your parents are?
Yes. So my father is the art critic Peter Schjeldahl. He writes for the New Yorker magazine still. And spoiler alert, he survived all the drama in the book. And my mother is an actor, was an actress when I was growing up, named Brooke Alderson. She did some episodes of Family Ties and Murder, She Wrote, and she played John Travolta's aunt in Urban Cowboy. Yes, thank you. I like the ooze for that. So I had my first Coca-Cola on John Travolta's knee at Gillies. So that is the best thing that ever happened to me. It's all downhill from age 4.
It's a very Frank O'Hara childhood memory. You're having a Coke with you with John Travolta.
I had a Coke with John Travolta. That's yeah.
I love this book so much. The family story seems very New York-y and yet very universal. I guess part of my question is, when did you sort of realize that you had a New York family and that you were a New York kid?
I did not know it for a long time. I mean, I think it's the fish who's what is water, right? I didn't know that was how I was growing up until I left and went somewhere else, and people were surprised. Because I think also one experience you have if you grew up in New York is you go to college or you go live somewhere else, and somebody's I grew up in New York, and you're oh, me too, crazy. Where, what neighborhood? And they're Westchester, and then you're and so I had that happen many times. There weren't a lot of kids in the era that I grew up who were living in the village. It was the baby bust, and it was a time when a lot of people left the city. So yeah, I didn't realize until so much later.
You were holding the card that every college student in the 80s was bluffing with. And yet it blows my mind how this book began as one kind of New York story. You're talking about the ultimate New York poet, the late, great, beloved, much missed Frank O'Hara, and you're talking about the community around him. You found these tapes that began with the book that your father began that you were going to finish.
Yes. And do we want to do a Frank O'Hara poem? Should we do that? So I brought lunch poems. Yes. Oh, good. Nods around the room. I like to see that. Okay. So we picked, Rob and I picked Ave Maria. For you. Mothers of America, let your kids go to the movies. Get them out of the house so they won't know what you're up to. It's true that fresh air is good for the body, but what about the soul? That grows in darkness, embossed by silvery images. And when you grow old, as grow old you must, they won't hate you. They won't criticize you. They won't know. They'll be in some glamorous country they first saw on a Saturday afternoon or playing hooky. They may even be grateful to you for their first sexual experience, which only cost you $0.25 and didn't upset the peaceful home. They will know where candy bars come from and gratuitous bags of popcorn, as gratuitous as leaving the movie before it's over with a pleasant stranger whose apartment is in the Heaven on Earth building near the Williamsburg Bridge. Oh, mothers, you will have made the little tykes so happy because if nobody does pick them up in the movies, they won't know the difference. And if somebody does, it'll be sheer gravy, and they'll have been truly entertained either way, instead of hanging around the yard or up in their room hating you. Prematurely, since you haven't done anything horribly mean yet, except keeping them from the darker joys. It's unforgivable, the latter. So don't blame me if you won't take this advice and the family breaks up and your children grow old and blind in front of a TV set seeing movies you wouldn't let them see when they were young. 1960.
Love that.
Holds up. Ooh, wow. Oh, wow. Good.
Part of the origin story for this book, though, kind of beautiful thing, is that this book, you read that poem when you were very young.
Yes, I was 9.
Very young.
Yes. So my father, sort of famously distracted, kind of classic man of the era, in his office, writing, chain smoking, not particularly paternal, say. And my mother said, you need to go do something for your daughter. So he's like, fine. So we went to the Strand, and he got me a stack of books and brought them back to me. And like one was like W.H. Auden's The Dyer's Hand, right? Wonderful book. A lot of literary exegesis for a 9-year-old. But lunch poems, I just like loved right away, and it always felt like it was for me, even when I was like a little girl.
Something beautiful. Ave Maria is a poem I thought of so often reading the book because that poem sort of sums up the sort of romantic dream that so many of us grow up with about New York. It's the place that people escape to become who we are, to invent ourselves.
To get picked up.
Okay, to get picked up. Maybe sort of a ancillary experience, but it's the place that people escape to in a town like the town that Frank O'Hara grew up in. Whereas it seemed for you, it was almost an opposite thing, that you grew up here and had to escape from this kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had like dreams of becoming a farmer. Like I got very like anti this, I mean, because I grew up in this very cosmopolitan bohemian world and the art world, and it started to seem kind of fake to me. Like, I read all the books that you read in high school that make other things, make fancy things or cosmopolitan things seem not real, like with a capital R. And so I dreamt of going to the country. And then I went to the country, and it was really boring. And so I came back quickly.
A fascinating part of the book is you go to college and you change your name. And that's kind of remarkable because a lot of people have the going to college and changing their hair or their first name or the spelling of their name or whatever. But you had a sort of a chance to just start over with a new name.
I was working at the Austin Chronicle. I was writing about like basically everything but music and art. So I did like book stuff and theater, a lot of theater stuff and news and things. I got asked like what name I wanted to use as a pen name. People didn't particularly like Schjeldahl as a last name because it took a very long time to spell and nobody could pronounce it. So I just dropped Schjeldahl and used my middle name, and I think it really freed me up. I think if I had to live in my father's shadow, I don't know that I would have ever become a writer.
Well, that's amazing because you became honestly, one of the things I envy about your writing, as you describe it in the book, is you get the job done. You're the Mariana Rivera who comes in to finish other people's
Enter
messes.
Sandman, yes.
Yes. But you are someone who just gets it done, whereas you describe his writing process in very comical terms as someone who agonizes over it and chain smokes and stays up all hours.
Yes, it's so funny. A friend of mine who I came up in magazines with, she always said, like, you don't ask an electrician if they have electrician block. Like, it's just, you have to get it done. Like, it's like, you know, and I think she also said, like, you know, people who can't make deadlines obviously have a lot of money in the bank, right? Like, if you need the check, like, you get the thing turned in. And my father was good at hitting deadlines, but he definitely made it like, he works really hard, and I think it shows in his writing. It's very beautiful. It's very crafted. It's very intricate. Like, you know, so the simplicity comes out of this real devotion to craft and what words he picks and how the sentence is structured, and he agonizes over every little bit. And I don't think I'm temperamentally like that. And then also, I just always had like kids around, so it wasn't something that I could really indulge in if I wanted to.
But it's funny how your process is so different, and that seems to mirror the sort of the independence that you have to find in this book, where you are, you know, growing up in the shadow of your father's writing, but determined to be a very different kind of writer.
Thank you. Wait, we have pictures. Do y'all want to see pictures? Okay, good. Okay, wait. So am I doing this right? Oh yeah. Here, wait. Okay. Oh yeah. Wait. Okay. So that's my goddaughter Alice. And so that's at my book party this summer. She was little. She was like 1 when I found the tapes. Let me see if I can get them to if this works. I found them in a file cabinet. Am I doing this right, Fran? Oh, there it is. Okay, so so this is the file cabinet in the basement. I was looking for a toy for her. There was like a drawer full of toys, and another drawer had the cassettes that my father had recorded his interviews in the mid-'70s on. Point over there. I'm so dumb. I'm sorry. I'm pointing at the screen. These are the tapes. That's what they look like. They were very dusty, and they all had names on them, sort of scrawled, and it was like Willem de Kooning or Barbara Guest or Larry Rivers, and I asked my father what they were, and he was like, I didn't want to look at them. Like, he was like, I don't, you know, he had done these interviews 10 years after Frank O'Hara died with all of O'Hara's contemporaries, and then he never finished it, and he always felt kind of bad about it. So I was like, I can finish this for you. It's going to be so easy and so fun. It's really simple. Am I going the right way? Where am I pointing? I'm like, oh, there it is. There's Frank O'Hara. Oh, there's his obit, which is where I got the title. So that's in the New York Times. It's a terrible obituary. So many errors, riddled with errors. And then, of course, you know, he's a modern art exhibitions aide, like also a poet, like whatever, he wrote some poetry. That's where he died. He was hit by a dune buggy in the middle of the night in 1966 on Fire Island. So it's one of these horrible ironies, right? Because like there are no cars allowed on Fire Island. So I think he's like the only vehicular death maybe like ever on Fire Island. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a, you know, reading in the 60s. There are there's my dad in, I guess, probably late 70s. There's my mother, just for fun. That's her. Like, this was like in front of the Parthenon in the 60s. She was a cruise ship hostess. So she would like lead tours out of like whatever those guidebooks were. This is, Frank O'Hara signed this to my father right before he died, like a month before he died, for Peter with pal ship from Frank, which I've stolen many times when signing books now because it's really the best signature. There's my dad reading with Ron Padgett, the poet. And that was the reading, I think, at which they traded poems and like, we're like, nobody will know. We're going to read each other's poems. And nobody did know because nobody knew them yet. There's me with my first typewriter. It was actually my second typewriter because I learned on an IBM Selectric before this, but this is my own typewriter that I had. Wasn't it? It's good, yeah. I mean, it actually is a fantastic typewriter. there's me with, oh yeah, is that right? It's a wonderful. Oh, I actually skipped one that was kind of. Sorry, I keep doing that. Vincent Katz, who's in the book, that's him. And me, when I was a little girl, we went to the Nutcracker together. Oh, sorry. Okay, and there's me on Halloween, looking really normal, not weird. There's me in ballet class. Just a lot of like random kid pictures to give like full, early 80s realness. There's me and my dad when I was a baby.
What a picture. A lot of stories in this picture, Ada.
I feel like there's a lot of them do feel rather narrative. Am I putting this right? I feel like it's gonna forward 5 of them. I'm hitting this. Yeah, is that right? Oh, there we go. There's my mom and me. Oh, I skipped one. Well, we'll let it go. That's me and my mom, and that is where, that's like St. Mark's Place and First Avenue. So, I like to joke that they're the only people who saw the East Village and were like, "This is a wonderful place to raise children." This is like my era of St. Mark's Place, right? This is when the Gap opened. Everybody was like, "The world has come to an end." This is so there. Another spoiler, if you haven't read the book, there's a fire in my parents' building. This is my dad's office after the fire. So good thing that I got the tapes and all the other stuff that I did get. Another sort of weird narrative picture. Like therapists would enjoy it. There's all of us. These are 3 pictures by James Hamilton, the Village Voice photographer, who happened to be at this opening. And I guess is that it? That's it. All right.
Incredible. There's a picture where he's holding you on the bridge.
Yes. Or I'm just like, what is happening? There's a tension. What does this mean?
There's an expression in your eyes. It's telling. It's an eloquent sort of expression.
Quizzical.
Physical, sort of maybe a little delight and maybe a little confusion.
Yeah.
Because so much of the book it's set in New York, and there's so many names that I found out after reading the book were legends. Like a lot of people, I read the book and did a ton of Googling afterwards and got caught up in all these people who populate the book and a lot of very exhausting adults. To be a kid in that kind of vibe, exhausting is the word that kept coming to me.
Exhausting Adults is a great title. I feel like that could be an alternate title.
It's like a full immersion. You're swimming in this sea of people who are very focused on their own creative energy, maybe to the exclusion.
That is definitely one way to put it. I think that's right. I think, and I do also think they were fighting against the repressive 50s, right? A lot of them had come from different places, from the Midwest, and they did not move to New York to be awesome parents. That wasn't why they were like, where I should go? I'll go to the Village, and then I'll be I'll really nail fatherhood. So yes, many of them did better than we had any right to expect.
The first time you told me about this book, it was a very New York scene. We were on the L train, ran into you on the L train to further make it an almost cartoonishly self-parodic New York-y scene. We were coming back from the kitchen where we had both seen the same Stephen Malkmus solo show. We saw this awesome, dramatic, screaming argument on the L train between 2 total strangers. And it was kind of a beautiful, and you told me about this book, and I was so excited for it, and the way you had framing it, which I think it was at this time, was your book about Frank O'Hara. And obviously it became very complicated at that point. But I was so excited that you were doing this and that you were finishing this story that had been begun. And it's lovely how part of the book is that it's not done. It's not finishable. These stories just do not have endings.
Yes, that is the sort of awkward thing about memoirs is like unless you were not, alive anymore, like there is more story after you decide that you have finished it. As I recall, also on the subway, we were like very politely sitting like with one seat in between us, and someone just came and sat down in it, so we had to continue the conversation around them. It was a funny night. Yes, no, and it's funny because so my father, when I was working on the book, got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And so I thought what I was doing at that point when I changed direction on the book was I was going to give us the like closure we never had, right? I was going to like wrap it all up. We were going to see each other. We were going to really have this beautiful moment. And then he just would not do it. Like he would not play along with my dream of like, and then you say this, and then I say this, and then it's all wrapped up and we're done. Like, it didn't work out that way.
It seems like he could not have given you more material had he consciously been trying to supply you with this book. So many moments come to mind. I have to admit, when you send him the Simone Weil book and he's telling you how great it is.
Oh yeah, he was like, oh yeah, you read Gravity and Grace? It's really good. And I was like, yeah, I gave it to you like a week ago, like, and this is not dementia or anything. This is just not noticing. Like he's totally with it. Like, yeah, no, I definitely mailed you that. And that happened like 3 or 4 times.
I cannot get the verbatim words out of my head when you said that you had sent him this book as your daughterly gift. He said, I was kind of wondering why it showed up.
Like, oh, but he was like, nah, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Yeah.
That aspect of the story seems New Yorky as well, that, you are a kid who is very independent. I kept wondering, I have 3 sisters. I kept wondering how different this story would be if there were siblings involved, maybe splitting the emotional labor. Best case scenario. That doesn't always happen now, does it? But it was funny that I told you right away when I read it that it made me think so much about having siblings. I sent copies of this book to all 3 of my sisters because there was no way I was loaning it because I was never getting it back. And anyone I loaned it to was going to be mad that another one didn't get it first. It was very selfish. I didn't want to have the book stolen. But it's very different that it's just you sort of alone stranded on this, boho adult island.
Boho Adult Island, another good alternate title for the book. Okay, should I read that part? You asked me to read. Okay, so like I mentioned, my father got diagnosed with lung cancer, and so this was after he does the treatment, he has immunotherapy. So I just heard back about the scans. This was on the phone. He said the immunotherapy worked. I'm part of the 35%. I went with my parents to my father's next Memorial Sloan Kettering appointment. We were told the tumors had shrunk by more than half. He was not cured, but he probably had extra time now and would likely cough less. The doctor asked how he was feeling. Tired, depressed, he said. All I want is to do is write, and I can't concentrate. You could retire, the doctor said, smiling but serious. People do retire, My father shook his head. How about therapy, the doctor asked. Oh, I suppose it might feel good to rattle away to someone for 50 minutes without feeling like I had to apologize, he said, but it was clear he wouldn't pursue that course of action. He weighed 128 pounds. His eyes looked huge behind his glasses. He'd grown a gray beard, add a rough collar, and he could be in an old master's painting. When he pulled up his shirt to show the doctor his chest, I saw his pale, thin body. He joked that he was playing host to a gang war between the immunotherapy and the cancer, with both living off the land. My father asked if he could have something for his low energy. The doctor said they could look into steroids at some point. Oh, my father replied, brightening. I used to love speed. That could be great if I love speed too, my mother chimed in. The two began chattering about how in the 1960s they took speed all the time, how they got so much done. Okay, that's enough, I said. It made you crazy, though, my father said to my mother, ignoring me. When we started dating, I made her throw it out, he told the doctor. And you thought I did, my mother said, laughing girlishly. Will you both please stop talking about how much you love speed, I said. Speed is not even on the table here. The doctor is talking about your maybe trying steroids at some point. Steroids are not amphetamines. Oh, my father said, looking disappointed. My mother, as she rummaged in her purse for a stick of gum, whispered, I did love speed, though. And also, I've mentioned that to my parents, like that moment, and my mom basically says, like, yeah, but I did. I really liked it.
Amazing. Scenes like that, it seems like maybe at some point you must have been thinking that you would outgrow those. Like where the dutiful daughter getting them back on track to take care of their messy lives.
Well, I mean, it was a wild couple of years, and I think, like, I'm sure a lot of you have had experienced similar things in the past couple of years where, because I had this run of deaths and bad news and fires and chaos, and then I was like, 2020 is going to be the best year ever because it won't be like 2019, and then my grandmother died in January, and then COVID hit. So it was not a better year, it turned out. And yeah, no, I think I wound up really immersed with them. Like we were just very intertwined for that period of time, and I think having a book to write at the same time was a great gift to me. Like I don't know if people who are writers here like have that, but where you feel almost protected by the fact that everything's copy, right? That like actually you can take things that are happening in the course of a day and you can feel all the feelings, but then you can also turn them into something. You can make some kind of meaning out of them.
If you're brilliant, which you are, a book of yours, this kind of ties in with, as you know, I love the book you did before, Why We Can't Sleep. One of my most recommended, most passed around books. Absolutely amazing. It seems to me there's a lot of connection in the sense of the generation, Why We Can't Sleep is about being an adult. Middle-aged is a inflammatory term that I would like to avoid. But an adult where you've got dependence on both generations, the older generation, the younger generation, and you really thought that things might be a little easier by this point. Do those books seem linked to you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like this book is sort of all three of the last books all together in some way, because it's sort of like St. Mark's is Dead. It's like a lot of the same characters. And then Wedding Toast I'll Never Give is about like difficult relationships, and like that one was about my husband, and then yeah, Why We Can't Sleep, which I feel like you are like like most of the people who champion that book are women in menopause, so I feel like you gunning for that book really makes me happy. It's really nice. So that book, is about being Generation X, and it's about like hitting all these roadblocks at the worst possible time, and really, yeah, trying to take care of other people and trying to work hard. I think this is a generation that really put a lot of stock into diligence and hard work, and that's something that I did, and I thought it was going to result in great triumph with my family and career-wise, and in the book, as you can see, it does not happen.
Unbelievable. I'm sure people have questions from various.
There was a nod when yes, we will take all questions. Yes. To recap, question was
getting to understanding any human being, and but just that, yeah, did your mother ever give you any insights into how to understand your father? Because it seems she's in the, coming through the book, and you expect her to have some kind of moment to help you because she's not quite as difficult, let's say, as he is in your life. And but yeah, I wondered.
So yeah, she sort of shows up and delivers a zinger and then leaves a few times. Like one of them is where I only ever done one writing residency. It was McDowell when my son was like 7 or something. It was really hard to leave. That was when I was doing St. Mark's is Dead, but I really I was like never gonna get it done otherwise. And so I was gonna go, and I told my parents that I was doing that, and my father was like, "Oh God, a writing residency." Like he was like acting was so lame, right? It was like so embarrassing. And my mother goes, "Your whole life is a writing residency," which I really appreciated. She doesn't do that very often, like kind of put it, smack people down, but that was really appreciated. Yeah, I mean, I think I became more aware of how hard she'd worked over the years. It's like something that I think people who are really good hosts, and she's an impeccable host, they make everything look easy, right? Like everything, like the dessert, effortless, right? The like decorating, effortless. And in fact, I think she devoted a huge amount of her life and her life force to taking care of him and to making it possible for him to be a writer. And I think she sees it. She sees it more now, but I think it was just part of it was she came out of that generation too, right? So I think she took that role of support very seriously and without maybe a lot of criticism of it. She was like she was basically like, he's a good person. Like she really believes in his heart as being very good. I think she thinks he's actually very kind, and that one of the other things she said, though, he does have a tendency to put his foot in his mouth. Like she said, he should get business cards that just said "bridge burner," so that like when he offended somebody at a party, he could just fling the cards into the air as he left. So she sees that he's difficult. She's always said he's difficult. But so basically, I think that is the line is like difficult, but good. And so there was not, no, I did not from her get a ton of a multi-layered exegesis of his character. No. Yes, please. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about the transition between, thinking that you were going to write or you're going to complete this biography of O'Hara, and then realizing that the book needed to go in a different direction and become about you and your family and your whole life. Really, was that a difficult adjustment to make, or how did you do that?
It was not a willing adjustment, right? So like I was trying really hard to do this, to finish the work my father started, and I believed that I would succeed for many reasons. And one is because I've been a ghostwriter for the last 10 years. I've done 20 books in 10 years. I enjoy that work. I think I'm good at it. Like and I haven't had a lot of trouble getting things done, making people say what they need to say, and getting things, carried along. There's, in Pulp Fiction, there's the character Mr. Wolf, who's the murder cleanup specialist. I've been compared to him many times because they can come in and there's like blood all over the, upholstery, and it's no problem, right? So in this case, I thought really easy to finish this book. And then, I ran into trouble with the estate, and that was the main thing. It was, so it was fire, cancer, COVID, and those I think would have still been okay. I still would have gotten the book done, but the estate trouble really stopped me. So then I was like, well, I can't do the book I thought I was going to do. I can't just do a straight biography, because to do a biography, a really serious authorized one, you need permission to quote from the work. And it became clear that was not something I would get. And at that moment, I decided that it would be more personal. And that was also the moment when everything was kind of going all to hell, family-wise. So convenient. A lot of material.
It's amazing, and the book is still, for somebody who didn't know a lot about O'Hara, it's still a really good biography of O'Hara, I found. So it's not as though you abandoned one thing and went to another. I think you did it all.
Oh,
it's really wonderful.
I did it all. Thank you. I like that. That's really nice of you to say. And I hope it comes through how much I really fell in love with Frank O'Hara, like working on the book, just hearing his friends talk about him. What a special person. Like, what an extraordinary, saintly character. And, it made me love his work even more. Yes, please.
I want to know, in looking at O'Hara, but also at your parents and their whole kind of coterie at the time, how much of the kind of social scene and the downtown literary scene, when all these parties and going to bars and hanging out, which now today has a very glamorous sheen to us to read about, and it seems like this lost, era of the 50s and the 60s in New York. How much, after you got to think about it and read about it and know it well, how much did that seem like actually integral to the work that Frank O'Hara was producing, that your dad was producing, that all these other writers who by themselves at their typewriters were actually creating this much vaunted social literary scene? How integral was it to the work itself? I mean, the common thing is to say, oh, it was all fuel. They fueled each other. But did some of it seem poserish to you, like looking back and the relationship, but basically of the social scene to the actual artistry? How did that sit to you?
It's funny. I hadn't really thought about it too much, but I think there is, when people quit drinking, for example, right, or quit smoking or something, there is this question of can they still write? Can they still do these other things that they, be creative? If you give up heroin, can you still be a rock star, right? What's the connection between your vices or your social life and your work? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do think it's probably possible to write beautiful poetry and not be a monster. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. But Frank O'Hara was not a monster, right? He was actually he played with his friends' kids. He took them swimming. He had food fights with them. The one person who was a child in that world who my father interviewed on those tapes, he told these unbelievable stories about O'Hara, and they were so moving. He read his entire 70-page story about a medieval dog named Arf and gave him notes, right? That's a good godfather. He really showed up, and so I think he's a testament to how you didn't have to necessarily be a really bad guy.
Part of the Frank O'Hara mystique is how benign he seems, that he's not, he doesn't manifest a lot of neurosis and struggle. He's just so breezy about everything. I always think of what he said he wanted his epitaph to be, just someone who lived as variously as possible.
Yeah, grace to live as variously as possible. It's on his tombstone out.
Just such a beautiful way to put it. It's funny because he seems like such a contrast with a lot of the figures in the book.
Yeah. Who are very neurotic, a lot of them. And also even on these tapes, they're really trying to cover themselves. They're trying to sell some version of their own story and of their connection with O'Hara, and to try to sound glamorous. And you see the effort, right? You see them trying to paint this picture that doesn't feel 100% authentic somehow.
Isn't that what perhaps that Maureen O'Hara, his sister, was worried about? That the picture that would be painted because of how these people who had their own agenda for what they said about him, that it would color the story and not make people really see the real person that he was?
I mean, I can only conjecture. I don't have a lot of insight into what's guided her management of the estate, but from what I have seen, she wants people to read his work and to just know him through his work. And I think you're right that the scene, because it was so because there was carousing, because there was this, some of them were very debauched. There was Libertine Larry, it was Larry Rivers, right? That maybe the idea of them telling his story would make anybody who loves somebody a little sheepish, a little or just wary. I'll say wary, of that being the final word. So I don't think she was, if that's correct and that was her take, I don't think she was wrong to be concerned. And I think she also, like, in the one conversation we really did have, I thought she made a lot of good points.
And this is a very minor thing, but you explain how your first name came about. But where did Calhoun come from?
Oh, there was an editor. Was it Art in America? Betsy Calhoun Baker. She's the art world editor, and she was a good friend of my parents when I was born. I was born on St. Patrick's Day, and they called her. This is the story I've heard. They called her and said, Betsy, we wanted to give, our baby a potential stage name if she ever went, into the theater. And so we decided to give her your middle name as her middle name so she can drop Schjeldahl if she wants. So they actually had thought this, but they thought if I became an actress. They had it in mind as if I became, if I took to the stage. And she said, oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so flattered. That's incredible. It is Scottish, not Irish. So it's the idea that it was a testament to St. Patrick's Day, that it was going to be this great, we gave her an Irish, anyway, it did not take in that way, so.
What does it mean that they gave you a name planning on you to discard it?
That's a good point. That's a question for therapy, I think. Oh,
Right.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe that's true too. Yeah, but no, it's funny because I also Calhoun is a very common name, and so I did ancestry stuff for an article once, and so I'm on there, and so I would say once a week I got a Calhoun inquiring about my bloodline, my Calhoun bloodline, and I'm like, no, it's actually a totally made up name, it's not, can't help you with your Civil War, great great grandfather. Anybody else? Does anybody want to talk about their own dysfunctional relationships with their parents? Because I was just on book tour and there was a lot of that, and I rather enjoyed it. So. Oh yes.
What about Spencer? How has he reacted to this book? And how has that, that was one of the most, I think most people have read the book, but I don't know if you have. But Spencer, which is a pseudonym.
So my father's best friend was a young writer who he just adores, and they're still very close. And I have left it to them. They talk about everything, including the book. And there's the line, it's not your business what other people say about you. The A thing. I don't know, but it's really between them how it shakes out. And it's funny, it's the only time I've ever used a pseudonym, a fake name. And it was just because he's not in the book. It's not him. It's somebody filtered through the way my father talks, right? It's how he talks about, and he, it was something that was true for a long time when I was growing up. He always had protégés. He always had young people around him, and or good friends that he was close with, and who I routinely would, and this is unbecoming, right? In me, I would always be sort of envious. I would be like, why are you, why does this Harvard student get all this attention? So again, he's not a real character in the book, right? He's this projection screen. That's why he got a fake name.
The fact that you just moved back to St. Mark's, it's kind of an amazing sort of context for the book, especially if you've read the book, the idea of going back to this home as an adult is just kind of a lot.
It's a lot.
A lot, as the kids say.
It's a lot. Yes. Thank you for hosting me in my state of whatever. Yes, I just moved back 2 weeks ago to my son. My 16-year-old son is in my childhood bedroom. He is going to high school from the room that I went to high school from, and it is very weird. It's good, weird, good, weird. It kind of goes back and forth like that.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ada.
you.
This book is phenomenal. St. Mark's is Dead is phenomenal. Wedding Toast is phenomenal. Why We Can't Sleep is extra phenomenal. And I just want to thank you for these amazing books, but especially this one, which totally unique. There's no other book like it.
Oh, well, you're just the greatest, and what a gorgeous writer you are, and I love all your work, and I'm so glad to
for a fan.
get to hang out with you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.